Okay, so the colours that I'm going to use, I'll show you the palette in a sec. I just got to turn my screen first. The colours that I'm going to use are all the basic ones. Royal blue, Payne's grey, titanium white, sap green, red ochre, which is also transparent oxide red, maybe a bit of ultramarine blue. See how it goes. So foliage, next to sea and clouds, is probably one of the hardest things. Well, you know, let's not use that word. One of the most challenging things that you can paint. I'm going to show you how to do it easily. Things first. The palette, right, it starts out sort of organized like that. This is all straight from the tube. And they're all, sometimes you squirt paint out and it's got so much oil, everything starts to move. But these are all quite nice and dry. So I'll be adding a little bit of oil. And I won't be doing all the mixing. I'll do some mixing on this, but most of it will be done on the glass surface that I've got on my bench here. What I do to start with is very loose, and it doesn't really matter what it looks like, frankly. And if you can get that in your head, it's a very useful thing. So I'm going to use a small brush to start with. I'm going to do a bit of sky. This is the linseed oil. Now, the thing about linseed oil, it can be quite grubby. I've had this for months. It's just something that, you know, something from the supermarket came in this container. It's linseed oil and it's got all kinds of other colors in it, but it doesn't really matter. It sort of gets absorbed. And I've got a brush here that's I used recently on another painting, which is a great big painting over there. I'll show you that at the end. Or you can look at my latest video. I think it might be that. Is it that one? It could be that one. Not, or maybe not the latest, but the one prior to that. So this has got blue on it, and a lot of the paint that's on this brush. And all I'm doing really is just dipping the corner. So there's almost dry paint and a little bit of oil on that. And what I want to do is make an interesting color. So blue, right. So let's say over here, there's going to be a tree there. Right, so then there's a gap between the two, and you can see how little paint I'm using. I'm just putting on a stain. Really nice and loose. Now, that little lot there is going to be all tree. Doesn't matter that the blue goes into it. That's how loose you want to keep this. And of course, you need plenty of this stuff. And I should have torn a load of these off before I started. Let me just get a few of those. Okay, so see, I can do that to it, and there's so little blue in that bit there. I can put color on top of that, and it won't have any effect. It'll just disappear. So let's just smudge that all up a bit there. And as I say, probably on pretty well all of my videos, when you're wiping anything, no matter what it is, keep an eye on it, because you may actually create something that you didn't expect. Question of keeping your wits about you. So believe it or not, this is red oxide, transparent oxide, red ochre, whatever you want to call it. So I'll just shove a little bit of that on. Quite honestly, unless you've seen someone paint skies like this, you'd think that it was crazy. You know, how can you put brown in the sky? well, you can actually put anything you like in. You see, if you mix royal blue, transparent oxide red together, without mixing them in this way, you get that color up there, which is actually quite a nice color. You won't believe me at the moment because it looks dreadful, but it's actually quite a nice color on a sky. Slightly mysterious. Let's put a little bit more on that. Don't forget, the brushes are really cheap. Can't really read barcodes, but from memory, this one's probably just over €2, which is, I think, less than $2. I honestly don't know, but okay. Now, and also at the moment, you see, everything's got brush marks all over it. They will all go away. And I'll show you how. Several ways of doing it. One is to use a brush that's never been used, preferably one that's never been used before, and you just sort of stroke it over it. But that's a little bit early on this one yet for that. The other way is just get a bit of paper and just sort of do this in a circular motion. And the brush marks disappear. Now, I'm not trying to make a blue sky with white fluffy clouds. I'm after something with a little bit of atmosphere. But as you can see, that does actually knock down the brush marks quite a lot. It'll be more later, but for now. So what should we do over there? Let's the bits where I'm going to paint the tree, by the way, I'm leaving mostly white because I want the white to show through. So let me just carry on sort of pushing some color around until I come up with something that I think I can use. And you've got to keep in your head also, very important when you paint, particularly if you're a newish painter, don't worry if it looks messy. You know, everything starts out messy. And if it doesn't, then you're being too tight and trying to be too precise. Right, so I'm going to just put a bit of white in that. And this is the same brush, just adding white to it. And I think later I'm going to need some light there. So let's just have a little blob just down here. There'll be a blob of light here, but I won't bother with that until I've actually painted the tree. And the tree won't necessarily be that shape. Okay, it's just the shape that is on the board at the moment. So let's have a little bit of a slightly misty, ethereal look coming across there. Now, when I was a student, when I first saw the tutors painting, they didn't often paint in front of us, but to start with, in the first year at college, they would paint and they would show you how they would paint a picture. And I, up to that point, would never have believed how they could make a painting from the messes that they put up before us. They were so loose. And of course, we all thought that they weren't being truthful. They were just showing off. You know, they've obviously got some kind of devious plan going. But how could they make a painting out of such a mess? And it took a few weeks before it really clicked. That's what you have to do. There is no other way. You've got to be able to make a complete mess and not worry about it. Now, watch what happens when I do this. I sort of do that there. Don't see the white shape. See what's happening around it, and see how interesting you can make paint look. Because one of the things that makes this style of painting is the sounds like an obvious thing, but it's the interest you get in the paint, not necessarily the subject. So when you think about it, all I'm doing is a bunch of trees next to a bit of land that might have water. I don't know yet. I might put water in, but we'll see. So red ochre. So here's a little glimpse. Palette, that's all it looks like at the moment. Just slightly more messy than it was earlier. And when this is filled up, I'll be moving on to the piece of plate glass that I normally work on for big paintings. Right, so trees. You might have heard me say, oh, Payne's grey, that's the other colour that I'm adding, but not much. I'm adding Payne's grey to sap green and red ochre just to get a little bit more contrast. Yeah, trees. I've often said it, but don't necessarily make trees tree-shaped. Not all trees are tree-shaped. Now this, right, one side of the brush, you can't really see it, but there's slightly more red here, slightly, only slightly. This side is the green side, that's the red side. That's how I get, see that darker bit there? That's got more red in it. The lighter bits, which I hope are picking up on the screen, are the more green bits. So, yeah, it is showing up. I'm not really looking at the screen. Now I know that it all fits. There used to be this problem with Zoom that it would distort the image slightly, but they seem to have resolved that. Anyway, so when you've got a brush like this, like see, slightly darker there, that's got more red in it. And also the other thing is the speed that you move the brush. That's all very important too. So if I move the brush quickly through there, you see that light streak? That's the brush pushing the paint away, and you want that because it actually helps you build form into a landscape. So this tree, now at the moment, you see, if I just continue right across there, let's just do it and show you what I'm talking about. If I do that, you see, that's just a horizon. And if you stand to the side of the painting and you paint the horizon, it will go downhill. It's always the same. So I'm just going to lift that up there. So that's just a horizon, but I want to bring it closer to us. So to bring it closer to us, I've got to put a tree on there. So let's just push that into the paint. Leave that little light bit there because I might be able to use that. In fact, I'm sure I will be. So remember, we're doing tonalism. Tonalism is not the same as Impressionism. Impressionism is quite scientific. And if you go on the internet, there's an old film of Claude Monet painting. And it's obviously in black and white, obviously, but he glances over to his right, camera's to his left. He glances over to his right, probably his lily pond or something. And he's painting, great big painting. And he looks as though he's just picking the paint up, dabbing it, picking it up. Very, he's back and forth from the palette to the painting. And it looks as though it's just sort of random, but it isn't. It's all very scientific. He knew instinctively what colors work next to what color, whatever, to get the maximum effect. And it's a little bit, it's putting a color next to a complementary color occasionally just to make it zing slightly. Just check the lighting on that. Still okay, I think it is. So, but this tonalism is different. It's everything has a fuzzy edge, basically. And if you really want to study tonalism, I know most of you know, but the new people today, if you've not heard of George Inness, go and look up George Inness. It's INNES, I think. American tonalist painter. or look up Bruce Crane. He's worth looking at. And still, sorry, I'm just looking at my screen here to see what it looks like for you. Oh, and the other thing I'd say for the new people, you won't see the true colors until I photograph it at the end. The video going through Zoom gets mashed slightly. So what you see is a slightly lighter version of what I'm actually doing. So I want to get a bit of movement in the landscape. If you remember the original picture, it had like the land was slipping here. There's like a, let me see if I can do it. Let's just push the brush, dig into the paint a little bit, and then a quick wipe. Like the land drops slightly down here. So think of it as a sculpture with paint. Oh yeah, and I remember I was going to say, my tutors, you see, they go all over, something 6 feet square, big brushes. Sometimes they'd use rollers or anything they wanted. They, you know, there's one chap gave us a demo using a twig, and it's quite incredible what he could do. But I remember not far from the college. The college was on the south coast of England. Just sort of push that up there. There was a cliff by the sea, and it had like a wall of trees, and that's probably why I painted this original painting the way that I did. The one at the, not the second picture I showed you, the first one. I don't think I can show you while I'm, maybe I can. I wonder how that will, let me just check. Can I share the screen while I'm recording? Let's see what happens. I think I can. Right, so I think you can see that. So that wall of trees on the right, I remember I would have been about 20 or younger, yeah, probably under 20. And there was exactly what you're seeing there, this wall of trees. And I remember standing there looking at it and thinking, I'll never be able to paint that. Absolutely never be able to do it. But I was wrong. It's hard to admit, but I was wrong. And the thing is to disassemble everything in your head. In other words, just sort of scrub paint around until you actually get the textures that you want. So while it's oily, I can start just to show you exactly what you do, how you get texture in. First rule, don't be careful. Just throw the paint on. So I'm going to stop sharing. So what you missed there was me doing that. Okay, so there's one level of foliage going on there. That's not final. Nothing's final until I keel over. One of the other things that you want to get in your head when you paint is most people paint, I think personally, there's two reasons. Some people want to be an artist because the business side of it, it's actually it can be a way of earning a living. So I'm just mixing up. In fact, I'll show you some mixing, and there's no organization involved. That's green, that's a lump of red there. All I'm doing is this until I get the right consistency where it's not, I'm absolutely sure it's not going to travel down the palette. Okay, thin, mobile, and but with a little bit of opaqueness. This is a bit of Payne's grey at the top here. Just shove a little bit in. Don't overdo it. I mean, it's just literally, you know, just, I suppose it's almost like painting everything with a stain. So let's put a little bit of dark there next to it. There's a little something there. No idea quite yet what it's going to be. Well, it's going to be a tree, yeah. But I mean, but how it will work with the rest of the picture, I'm not quite sure. Foliage, there we go, foliage. Right, I've got several ways of doing foliage. It's one of the few times that I use the tip of the brush, and I don't always do it. But the other thing is this, holding the brush like that, okay, touching it with your finger, and literally, it's like, you know, it's a battery-operated brush. All I'm doing is that. So that's the business end there. So I want that to try and go as fast as my brain is going. You see, my brain is not going this speed, right? When I'm painting a tree, I've actually preempted things here. I wanted to do a bit more softening on the sky, so I'll backtrack in a minute. But this is how I make foliage. So it's the tree is basically there. It grows out from that point. Okay, so in other words, just turn on automatic. Rotate your arm. Just get it describing the tree. But before I do that, I want to just do a little quick bit of work there. And it's not much at all, really. I mean, I'd often do this thing where I sort of blur the paint, not blending. I call it blurring. So what I'm doing, I'm just skimming the sky a bit. Because I've jumped ahead a bit there and put these trees in. I really shouldn't have done that. Not until I finished the sky. Yeah, I get carried away. You can imagine the mayhem when I'm making a video and I realize I've put things down in the wrong order. Anyway, so there's a little bit of softening. You can see it already happening. So up here, I'll just sort of pull that down a bit. And to give you another idea of, right, you know, nothing is ever wasted. Oh, by the way, this tree won't end up on its own, leaning over into the picture like that. That's just, you know, a good place to pause. Show you what, if I want to get back to the sky, which I do want to do a little bit more work. What I can do is just using a piece of paper, is just sort of fuzz up the edge of that and look to see what effects I can get into it. And actually, it's start to sort of speak. There's a point in every painting where the paint starts to talk to you, and it's almost like a Zen moment, because you stop. Well, I do anyway. You stop seeing the end result. In other words, you're in the now. You're in the absolute now. So I don't care what this tree looks like, because I know it's going to be good now. It's got that feeling to it. So I can just sort of basically mess up the sky a bit. And start to make it look even more moody and strange. Moody and strange is good. I mean, ask my wife, she'll know. So down the bottom here, okay, let's start doing that. Let's get the paint doing things. Now, don't worry what happens when you do something like that. You see, you might think, oh, what's going on here? Well, it doesn't matter what's going on there, because that's what paper's for. Now you watch, I can put light back there very easily. And in doing so, I can start to build up some perspective through there. A little bit of automatic perspective. So let's just show you what I mean by that, by putting something in front of it. Which one is there? That's good. I sort of do this here, just on the edge. And then put some solids down the bottom here. Let's have a little bit of, I quite like this. I don't know what it is, why. I mean, there's certain bits of landscape I find visually interesting. That's when you have a little bit of land that's subsided slightly. I wonder what a psychoanalyst would see in that. Bit unstable. But it's more interesting, the more textures and stuff you can get into it, and the more feeling of, you know, undulation. think that's what it is. So let's pull this tree back that way a little bit more. And I'm going to leave that little light bit at the bottom there. So the tree's going to go right off the edge. Haven't finished with the sky yet. So let's see what can we put up there. Let's get put a bit of mood up there. What color mood should we have? Let's have a little bit of ultramarine. Ultramarine is almost the ultimate blue. So let's just put some up there. I'm going to paint over that bit of sky in a minute. Okay, that's quite a nice little blue change there. Okay, so this is my blurring brush, this one. I can always tell the blurring brush, it's the one with least paint on it. And even though it picks up like a stain, you know, you can't help it. It's going to, you know, as you skim over the painting, just take off as much as you can each time. And then you can soften that out. Like so. Okay, now you may think, oh, look, there's a sort of strongish blue there, then it turns into this color, and then it turns into that color. And if you are thinking that, you're absolutely right. And it's all intentional. Because imagine, right, imagine, you're not a realistic painter. You want to be a tonalist. And you want people to look at your picture, see the realism. You don't want a cartoony look, right? You want to avoid the cartoony look. And I'll show you what I mean by that later, if I remember. You want a more naturalistic look, but it doesn't mean to say that the shapes and the edges have to be, you know, blue sky and in leaves, because leaves move, right? Occasionally you'll get a day where there's no wind and everything's static, you know. Isn't that boring though? So what you want is a feeling of movement. And the other thing I just want to check on, right? So I got stronger paint coming on there. Got that fuzzy bit, that sort of ethereal look, but then we've also got a few darker bits. And then what'll happen is you'll see depth. You start to get depth in the picture. In other words, the darker bits here are slightly closer to you. The darker bits down there tend to look further away because they're underneath in a shadow. And I'll show you how to do foliage hanging over those in a moment. Here, I just want to put a few marks just for later, a couple there. All right, so I got some nice feathery bits here. And then I want to do a little bit more. I think I've got reasonable perspective feeling through here. But I want to just make it a little bit more of everything. Right, so let's have for later, okay, because painting is all about building up different layers. So for later, I'm going to want some tree trunks. So if I lay a few in now and then carry on painting, they will move back into the forest slightly. It'll all become obvious. Okay, so the ground where the trees are growing from is this sort of line here, the base of that light bit there and here. So let's just have a few marks in there. Are they showing up? I think they are. They'll show up more in a minute. Okay, so that's just a piece of paper like that. Screw it up as tight as you can. So you want it really quite solid. And then dig your nail in at the base. There's two ways of doing it. Dig your nail in at the base and you get a strong, light tree trunk. Just got to move something on my camera. Oops, the other way. Sorry about the wobbles. Okay. And then so that's for thicker trunks. Let's just put another one there just so you can see it. So there's a couple of those. And then the other way you can use these which is actually quite effective, is to let the tip wander. So there's another one. Again, make that really as solid as you can. And if you put that on there and just let it sort of meander a bit, you'll get marks that aren't too contrived, because paper is going to wander, and it means that you don't have to sort of think about doing all this business. It'll actually do it for you. So here, let's put one over there. You may not see it. You'll see it on the final photograph, but no, it's sort of there. Okay, right. So now I've put those on. Will I do a bit on the sky? I think I'm just going to do a couple of things on the sky, and then I'm going to move on to texture and foreground a bit more. So for the sky, what have we got here? Let's have a bit of, to show you how easily you can achieve this sort of thing. Right, clouds. So how do you paint clouds? Right, so I'm hoping you're not of the bobbly cauliflower school, because they're boring. A bit of white paint shoved on this brush here. You do that a few times. Just take it over there, a little bit here, and just have a little touch of it just showing up there. Okay. So as you can see, clouds don't take long, because they are on there, and then all we do is just sort of blur them a little bit. Always take the cloud off the edge of the painting, because that's what they do. Okay, so I'm not going to enhance the sky any more than that at the moment. Oh, except for one thing, I'm going to remove those eyes, because every painting has a face in it. It's funny, I can only see it when I look at my viewfinder. It's like a giant fish looking straight at you. There's the mouth, these are the eyes. And the reason I can see it on the camera is because it's such a small picture from here, and it heightens everything up. So we just break that up a bit, get rid of that. Just take that up to the edge of that tree. Now you see, this is how loose you can be. See, I can take a bit more white, and I can butt that up against this tree here. Right, I'm not being precise. All I'm doing is just sort of merging the two together, just a little bit, not much, just a little hint. And then if I get the foliage brush again, and then go around that and go over some of what I just painted, suddenly that cloud is behind the tree. And where they mix, it's like the light coming through the leaves. Look at the viewfinder. Yeah, it's not too bad. All right, so this slightly fuzzy edged stuff here, what I'm going to do with that, sap green, red ochre, not so much of the Payne's grey. Bring the tree over that way a little bit. So let's start to get just a little bit aggressive. Hang on. Just lose some of that paint. Oops, still a bit aggressive. And take a touch of paint off. How's that working? Still not right. Okay. That's better. Okay, so now you see that sort of slightly misty edge starts to serve a purpose. When I've done the edge and actually filled in most of that there, I'll start to do more foliage effects. I might even introduce another color yet, but I'm not sure. Right, so edge of the tree. Right, what you don't want to do. It's always good to know what you don't want to do. One thing you don't want to do is to do, right, okay, so here's a bit of the tree there. Right, let's just do that. Now, the worst thing you can do, one of the worst things, just going to fuzz that edge up, is to go out, in, out, in, out, in. Okay, people get into this. What you've got to do is think how the tree grows, and they occasionally chuck out a wild card. Okay, make that shape unpredictable. That's what trees are. Trees and clouds and waves, of course, if you're painting the sea, they all got to have that unpredictable look. So how would I do that there? Well, I'd shove something over here like that. Don't make trees tree-shaped, as they say. Well, as I say. Okay, so you want your tree to look as though it's got the wind blowing through the leaves. I'm trying to do it without looking at what I'm doing on the screen too much. But every now and then I just need to look. It's like when you paint, you know, they say that you should paint for 20 minutes. Well, it's up to you how long you paint, but they used to say 20 minutes, leave the room, do something else, go back, look at your painting, and you'll see all the faults. That's not strictly true. You will see it with slightly fresher eyes, but you won't see all the faults necessarily. But what I like to do is look at the camera. I've got this little viewfinder over the other side of the room, which is about, I don't know, 2 inches wide, 1.5 inches deep. And it's like looking at this from 30 feet away. And it actually is quite helpful. Because it simplifies what you're looking at. So, you know, those tree trunks cover some of them up, so that, you see, one of the hardest things to do with tree trunks is to paint a little bit and then paint some leaves and then paint a bit of tree trunk and then paint some leaves, right? Do the tree trunks first, okay? Then put the foliage over them in places, and then that solves the problem for you. You don't have to paint between anything. It's just sort of, well, it's sort of automatic. Let's put a little bit more there. I'll talk more about that when we chat later. But think of almost everything as being in layers. Right, so this shape here, I mean, it sort of could work the way it is, but I'm not totally happy with that. It's I like the lean, but I don't like the fact there's nothing up there. So let's fill that up with something. And again, there's not a lot of oil going on this because there's enough oil on there. Let's just make the most random edge of a tree that I can think of. And let's put something up there on its own, and I'll show you why in a minute. There's this thing which you pick up, I suppose, after time, and that's undrawn detail. You know, it's possible to paint a tree without showing the thinner branches because the eye will fill in the details if you get everything pointing in the right direction. You see, this little hump leads to that. So I could get away with probably not putting a tree trunk in there, but I will put one in. But there are times when you don't need to. Right, let's have a little bit more there. And I quite like the blue showing through that. That's quite a nice effect. And again, just as a reminder to the new people, you know, I will be taking a proper photograph of this, so you'll see what it really looks like. Now, the land. What should we do? Let's do something with the land. I haven't finished with the eyes of the trees yet, but I just want to sort of fill up some of the foreground. And we got like a dark platform. We've got the ground slipping away here. So let's think, how would you build up what's going on over here? Well, the first thing you do is I always say it, don't worry about it. You know, think of conducting music. Okay, so we got this shape. Where's that logically? Where would that shape like to take you? I think it would like to take you sort of back down here and across. And the best way to do that is to have a bit of dark down here. Let's just shove paint on. You notice that I'm not doing this. Okay, I'm basically abusing the brush as much as possible. And the reason I do that is because one thing I really don't like painting is grass. And by doing this, you get grass automatically. I mean, I like grass and foliage and scrubby stuff, you know, but I don't want to paint every blade of grass and every weed. And you'll see, there we are, that's sort of, let's face it, there's an awful lot of grass there without painting a single blade of grass. And I can take that a little stage further, because I bought these, I kept the, I beg your pardon, I also bought, which one shall I use? I bought some of these, which are, funnily enough, this is a decorating brush. I guess you can get them anywhere, but I guess it's for details that you can't reach, you know, scrawny little stuff. But these are really good. They're so cheap, they come in a pack of about, I don't know, 6 or 8, I'm not sure. And it's really good bristle. Let's hold it against something dark so you can see it. There we are. And what I do is really give it a hard time and do that. Turn it into a chimney sweeping brush almost. Okay. And then start to use that. Let the brush do the work for you. What should we have? Let's have something in here. And I'm afraid it's going to be one of those things where you'll see this on the photograph, but you can see I picked up quite a lot of paint on that, I think. It probably looks quite dark now. So I've got a dark shape there. So the only way I can make that really interesting is to have something light in front of it. And I want to push away some paint. How effective is that looking? Yeah, you can see what's happening. And where else should we do it? We could actually do that over here. We could just do a couple of pushes up there. Is that even going to show up? Yeah, slightly. Let's have a bit more there. Let's have a light coloured bush. See, make the brush work for you. So there's a light coloured bush, but it's got a flat bottom to it. That pushes it back. If I left it round, it brings it forward. So I'll show you that again. If I do this, it's growing 10 feet in front of that. But I don't want that. I want it to move back. So I can actually move it back even further and more definitely just by doing this. So let's have a little bit of light on the ground there and then across. Well, yeah, I think I'll leave that for the photograph. You'll see that better when I do that. So I can also use this around the edge of the tree a little bit here. I can sort of touch that in a few places. See, going back to student days, what they would say to us, and we used to think that some of the tutors were just sort of pulling our leg. They'd say, go out into the grounds of the college and find a twig and come back with a twig approximately this long. You know, doesn't matter what it's like, same thickness as this brush, just a twig, no leaves, and you're going to do some drawing with it. And by drawing, they meant life drawing, in other words, so nude models. And the idea was that you would use anything dipped in ink to produce a painting of it, or a drawing rather, of a human being. Seems almost impossible. And to start with, it does seem possible. Quite still like that bit of light showing through there. But anyway, that's what you had to do. And we used to think it was some kind of sadism. Why not just give us a pencil? But anyway, I think the idea was if you can do it with a twig, you can do it with anything. You know, you can draw with your hands if you really have to. Okay, so that shape is just, that's got a bit more structure to it, and it's also got a nice windy lean. You can imagine the wind just pushing that. And what else are we going to do down there? Still, what am I going to do with this? Am I going to keep that? Do you know, I'm sort of going off the idea, but I'm just going to tone it down just another step. Maybe just to that. Okay, let me just check my focus on the screen. You will be surprised when you see the actual painting. I always say this because it's true. So it's got much stronger, juicier color. I guess soon we'll get it right one day. But it's much better than it used to be. Okay, so some shadows down here. Right, if you put shadows at the base of a tree, in fact, let me just do a bit of a dark line there too. If you put shadows at the base of the tree, that then gives you the ability to put foliage hanging over it. Let me just check my light. I'm just going to see what this does. I've got these lights. I can flick over to warm to see whether it changes what you're seeing. If I just click. Interesting. Okay, white, warm. I think that is closer to the actual painting, funnily enough. Just up the temperature of it a bit. Right. So yes, if you put darks down here, let's put a dark in there, a bit more there. And just to, yeah, in fact, I'll do it here. Keep that. A little bit of dark there. Still keeping that tiny light spot. And then just break up the base of that tree trunk with a couple of touches, like so. And then I think I want to feather that just a little bit more. And then get some paper on it. Right. I'll go back to the foreground again in a minute, but what else could I do? Let's have just a bit of light hitting there. And probably there. Something. Okay. I think what I'll also do is just open up. I don't like closing off the bottom area, see? So over here, I think I might actually get a bit more light just there. So you can add light to grass without, without the little tiny brush, you can do it this way. A little bit more there. Right, so texture, leaf texture. Right, when you're doing leaf texture, get a bit of paper, roll it up in a ball, really tight, small as you can make it. Now, that means that when you open it, it's got little bumps and ridges all over it. That's probably totally out of focus, but you're aiming for that will focus in a sec. Okay, as many bumps as you can get. So, what should we do? Let's have a little bit of foliage hanging down over these darker bits. And I'm also going to soften that a bit there. But because I've got a dark bit here and a bit there, I'm going to do this without getting in the way. And in fact, I'm going to zoom in on it without wanting to repeat myself. The photograph will surprise you at the end. So I want foliage hanging down over these shadows. So the only way I can describe this is you've got to, I think it's better if I zoom back, funnily enough. It looks like a total mess. Let's try it from there. Maybe that will do it. So I want the feeling of branches hanging down that catch the light, and there's something not quite right happening there. These need to be slightly connected through there. You've got to describe the essence of leaves hanging down. And, there has to be movement within the tree. Let's have a line across there. How does that look? It looks better in my camera than it does on the screen. It's quite interesting. Anyway, Okay, let's have a little lump or two there. And then this edge here, see, that's a little bit too aggressive. So I'm just going to break the edges up. Oh yeah, so another thing to get in your head is that you don't have to use a paintbrush. That was basically what I was telling you about, all this drawing of twigs and stuff. I think I might just add a few more tree trunks, and then I'll go over the other side and work on that. But let's have one that's going off that way. And another one there. Right, so I think we can make these little bits of light. These are quite nice, so I'll keep them. So I'm going to just pull downwards over some of those. That now, by having some that are greyish and some that are bright, you'll produce depth. So this one will look as though it's right in front of all the others there. And whatever you do, if you can avoid it, don't draw and paint trees that are shaped like the letter Y. Okay, we all know that branches come off tree trunks, and from a certain angle, you do get a lot of Y shapes, but don't overdo it. Let's have another stronger one coming down there. There we are. And let them wander. Trees do this. I have another one down here. Bring that one forward. This one's actually growing out closer to us. Obviously, the further it goes down, closer to us. I will put one Y. Oh, the other thing I'll just tell you, because it's worth knowing this, is that when I paint a tree, I do it the opposite way to a lot of people. A lot of people seem to think that they have to paint a tree from the bottom up, the way it grows. That bears no semblance to reality whatsoever. This is your world that you're creating, so you create it any way you like. But it is easier if you start at the top. You know where the tree is going to go. It's going to go up. So let's start on the up and work down. If you start on the up and let it meander down, you can see where you're going to finish it and stop. Okay, and also you'll get a better line. You don't have to start here and go up. So let's have another one. Let's have another. I'll tell you what. This lump of tree up the top here, let's give that somewhere to go. That's one of those long, scrawny, getting slightly fatter at the bottom type trees. And then if I can just get some of the paint off this brush, this is the one I've used for basically everything. It's a bit like tuning the brush. In other words, I'm hitting it on the palette, but I'm also sort of doing that just to sort of take the edge off it a bit. So I can now cover some bits of that trunk there, but you still know where it's going. Just leave enough for the eye to figure it out, and usually at the top it's going to be a bit covered anyway. There we go. So there's one there. This one here is right in front of us, but it's got maybe a slightly darker bit just there. In fact, I'll work on that in a minute. Down here, not comfortable with that. So what's the best thing to do? Well, just knock it back just a touch. Suddenly I'm comfortable. There we are. The bottoms of these things, usually there's a bit of foliage covering the bottom part because it's growing down obviously into the earth, right? So if you do that, smudge the bottom slightly, that'll look as though it's going in and getting buried in the foliage. And in fact, before I go to the other side of the picture, I'm just going to a little tiny, this is just, look, this isn't detail, this is just, in fact, it's the opposite of detail. It's just adding a little bit of contrast just there. Right, let's just look at the trees before okay, that, the top of that, let's try something else. Let's put a bit of light just there. That's good. A little bit coming over the front of this one. there. I think maybe there should be something just here. And in fact, while I'm at it, okay, so this is the simple way to paint a complicated subject. And just all you got to do really is keep it in your head that it's all very simple. And by that, I don't mean simple to do, or in a way I do. I find it simple. What I'm doing is simplifying what is a complex subject. So in other words, if you go out in the woods and you stand next to a pile of trees like that, you're going to think, well, where do I begin? Where do I start with my pencil? Well, first thing you do is you use the pencil. If you've got a Swiss Army knife or a little saw, cut into little bits, put the pencil on the ground, set a light to it, and heat up some coffee or something. That's all that's good for. You don't need a pencil. Okay, so imagine drawing all of this in a pencil and then painting it. Okay, that's my idea of hell. That would drive me bonkers, right? I've been there and done that in ink for various magazines over the years, and it's really tedious. So, you know, do it the quick way. What I was going to do now? Oh, I know. Every now and then in a wood, you get a tree that isn't doing what all the other trees are doing. So don't be afraid to put one in that's just done that. It just adds that little bit of reality to the subject. We can have let's have one Y. Okay, that's all. The only Y you're going to get. There's the Y. Okay, so bit of light, extreme foreground light, just there. And then I think I'll go the other side of the painting. So, right, let's move the other wood. Now, it's already accidentally being quite a nice tree. Some trees are not very nice trees, but this one is. And I'll tell you why. Right, there's something happening there that's totally accidental. I didn't see it when I obviously did it. See that light bit there going across? That nicely describes a shadow underneath without even thinking about it. That's totally accidental. I just want to lift some of the grass area below that. I just want to move it back a bit. So I'm just going to pull that, or do I? Let me think. It may not sound like much, but it can change a picture. No, I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it. And what I'll do instead, I'm going to pull this towards us slightly, and I'm going to get this bit to go away from us. Get it more central. That's better. Right. So here's a little extra landscape in there, and the light is hitting the ground, the other side of the tree. So you can. Whoops. Sorry about that. It can be quite clumsy sometimes. Right. So no, it doesn't look like much, but you'll see when I show you the picture what that's done. Nice little sort of a little place to go, but I'll tell you what will make it even better. The first thing is to make it slightly brighter, like so. See if I can zoom in without too much trouble. Right, so there's somewhere to go there, but the thing that will make it look more three-dimensional is to just put a little bit of light there on the other side. You know, one of the hardest things to do is move your hand away from me like that and maintain a straight line. It's actually quite tricky. Usually what I do is stand in front and then move my entire body, but I don't want to hide it. Okay, so what I want to do, you see, is get a connection between this light line here and where it appears over there. Like so. In other words, make that same level as that with an equal amount of brightness. That's not too bad. Okay, I'll leave that at that for now. And I think just in here, a couple of very thin. Oops, that's not working. So what I want to do It's just a hint of something going on in there, and just smudge the bottom of it, like so. Okay, so there's a quick bit of detail that isn't actually there. Now these light bits here are probably too light, so I can tone them down, funnily enough, without putting paint on them. I can tone them down by smudging them. So here's, I'll make a little thingy like that. And then I want there to be a bit of a glow. So if I just sort of do this. How does that look? Almost. Now, when I got it smudged, what I want to do is add a light spot to the middle of that. It's getting brighter without having that harsh effect that it had earlier. It sort of shows on the screen. Right, so I've got those. Now, on the original picture that I showed you, I had a similar thing. And what I did with that, I think I put white paint on my hand and I just smudged it a bit. But I think I'm going to make, what I did with the ground, I'm also going to do with the sky, just a bit there. And just take away some of the strength. Slightly more logical, I think. Or the other thing I could do is I could take some of this blue, literally just a stain. Let's do that. These clouds, there's some clouds without actually painting with white paint. So I've got a bit of blue on here. A bit of hint. A little hint in there, like so. And maybe when it's dry, I might add the white, which is probably what I did last time. Okay, now these trees. So I've got, as I said, I've got that light bit running across there, and I can sort of, again, a nice rough bit of paper, I can sort of just enhance that a little bit more and let the branch hang over, you know. Think of it sort of cascading leaves downward. Right, a few touches of texture up here. And then I'm going to whip around the edge of that. Doesn't look as though it needs it much in the camera. I mean, the painting tells me otherwise. Just zoom back a bit. Okay, so I want to soften the edge of that tree. Loads of ways of doing it. I could use paper, or I could just use a brush that has never been used. Let me think which one. Oh, actually, I could use this one. Okay, so this is my sky blending brush. So I can use that and just literally feather the edge just like a little bit more. This is actually smaller than my normal demo paintings. Normally they are 80 centimeters by 60, which, you know, you'd think I'd know what that is in inches by now, but I don't. But it's basically double this and a bit. And if you are a beginner, I advise you to start big. The bigger you paint, the easier it is. One of the hardest things to do is to paint a miniature. Okay, so there we are. There's a bit of softening. It's hardly touching it. Just enough to blur it. Because if you go outside and look at trees, just scan the immediate, if you've got trees growing near you, And you don't see every leaf. You basically get an impression, hence the word impressionism. And it's the same with tonalism, you know. A tonalist will never, is that camera going to move? Right. Will never really do detail. It's all totally an illusion. Okay, so all I'm doing is just softening edges and then be it, I think. Now, if you have painted today and you want a critique, I'm more than happy to do that. And if you, I know the regulars know this, but if you have a painting that you've done, you can email it to me. I'll put the email in the chat. Just looking at the thing. Okay. And yeah, if you email me a reasonably good JPEG of what you've done, I can tweak it in Photoshop to show you what I would suggest doing to it, if anything. Sometimes I don't have anything to suggest. But one of the main things, really, if you want a tree to look as though, you know, the wind is in it, you've got to soften the edges. There's no, you know, if it's too crisp, it won't work. Right, so I'm just wondering a couple of things to do with the foreground. And then that'll be it. So I'm just going to do a little something down here. What should we do? I think a little bit more leading people up. So let's have a couple of shafts of sunlight hitting it down there. There's some weeds. Who would have believed that weeds could look interesting? In theory, you see, you can take pretty well almost anything that you see in nature that people wouldn't look at twice, and you can turn it into a picture. You know, it's like when I drive up the road to the local shop in the village, on my right, there's a particular tree, and I've been looking at now for 7 years, I think. Every time I go by, I think, oh, I should basically just get out and stare at it properly and sort of commit it to memory. But it's not really a road you can stop on. But it is just, you know, sort of thing you wouldn't give a second glance to, but it does have certain aspects that I find fascinating, and I still haven't really figured out what it is I find interesting about foliage. I mean, you know, maybe I'm bonkers. Let's have a few little. There's a spot in the sky there. That's actually a bird. So we'll leave that. But if you don't want a bird, you know, let's just turn it into a slight hint of a bit of cloud structure. Why not? Okay, so we got a nice bit of perspective. Yeah, I think it definitely needs. And a couple more. They just magically appear. Now, when a complete beginner, when you show that to a complete beginner, they say, oh, well, yeah, that's easy. You've been doing it hundreds of times. I guess to an extent that is true. Yes, I have. But, and if you break it down into its bare components, this is a sky that looks like no other sky because it's a bunch of blue and grey and brown and white and all kinds of stuff. Let's zoom back. There we go. Right, let's strip it all down. I can do this on the final photograph, or I can just, I'll do it twice. I'll do it very briefly now. So the sky, right, so it's made of titanium white, the same browns that you're seeing in here, okay, red ochre. There's probably even better, there's even green in the sky, okay. What is it, royal blue, tiny bit of ultramarine, but you wouldn't know it up there. It's so little. Payne's grey for the really dark bits, with blue added. You'll be quite surprised when you see that, I think. And then pieces of paper and a very abused brush. And if you want, oh yeah, if you want a nice, I haven't done this for a while. Let's do it. So down here, you want the odd thing. I don't know what they are, but they're growing down there. A couple of them. That's it, really. Right. So I've taken greens and reds and blended them into the sky with an irregular edge, as irregular as I can make it. Okay. There's really no drawing in the conventional sense of drawing. You know, anything that looks like detail is a complete error on my behalf. It's just a mistake. But if it's a mistake that looks good, keep it and enhance it. What do I think in there? What on earth is going on there? I don't know. Let's got that. Probably if that had a little tree trunk down the middle of it, might look, I don't know, maybe. Right, what else? Oh yeah, the other thing. Something else I really like doing, if I can find a brush that will do it. Right, this is a rigger. Tiny little rigger, called a rigger because they were used for painting rigging. Now, when I do a tree that hangs over like that, I don't know why, I'm sort of fascinated. I just like this effect. There we are. There's the odd rogue tree that's growing out on its own there. Let's have, should we have a hint of one through there? And then I think that is a very dark line I've got there. So I think what I'm going to do is just break it slightly. Either break it or mute it. Now, if this mutes it and knocks it back, it's a mistake. So I either want to mute it or break it. So we'll see what happens. If I just get a piece of paper and just touch it on it, it's like blotting paper. There we are, that's better. That's pushed the base further away. So it's actually in line with the other trees now. And then I just want to sort of do this just to add a bit of dark just there. Maybe there. Okay, right, so I'm going to take the photo and I'll send it to all of you. You'll be able to download it from here, but I can also email it to you later. Right, so I'm going to stop the recording. Hope you've enjoyed that. And picture in take me about 10 minutes. And thanks for being here.